we have been looking at Catch Me If You Can, and trying and pulling some spiritual ideas out of that. We're going to continue with that. There's like I mentioned at the very beginning of this particular section, there's a lot of different ideas that you can pull out of this movie because it does have a lot of. It's a lot about consequences of your actions. It's a lot about people deceiving other people, and it's a lot about sort of a good guy trying to chase a bad guy, but the bad guy looks cooler than the good guy. And so all of this stuff definitely plays into the way that we understand the scriptures, and it's a useful place to kind of work from. So we've looked already, we've seen that this guy, Frank Abagnale Jr., has become a con man where he's particularly successful at writing bad checks and getting away with it. And he used creating an identity as an airline pilot to make it easier for him to cash checks. It also made it possible for him to fly around for free without having to actually, pay for it or have to have any accountability, which made it even easier for him to distribute the checks that were not that were illegitimate, because he could do it a long way away from where he could move from city to city where he wasn't necessarily being caught while he was doing it. So he has been very successful at this. And then what we're going to see today is that he gets one more piece of information that enables him to go and take it sort of to the next level of this whole thing. And so again, by playing on the weaknesses of other people. So let's go ahead and take a look at this particular scene. And I want you to pay attention, because this is a period of time. This is in the late 50s or early 60s. This is a period of time where a lot of the things that we are used to being part of our banking are just being developed. And one technology in particular is what they're going to be talking about here, which was relatively new at that time. Today it's completely standard and we've gone way beyond it. But I want you to pay attention to why he's able to use that new technology to his advantage.
You out for a steak dinner.
Now we feed the checks into the maker machine, which uses special ink to encode the account numbers on the bottom of the checks.
And where are these numbers?
They're right here.
Right here?
They're called round numbers.
So where do the checks get routed to?
I don't exactly know. Nobody ever asked me that before.
Our next item up for bid is also from the Jersey Central Bank foreclosure. This is a Micker encoder machine used to encode bank checks. Do I have an opening bid?
Our unknown subject is a paper hanger who started working on the East Coast. In the last few weeks, this unsub has developed a new form of check fraud, which I'm calling the float. What he's doing is he's opening checking accounts at various banks, and then changing the Micker Inc. routing numbers at the bottom of those checks. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
The remote thing is broken. You might have to do with that. You gotta try to.
Hey, Mullen, it should be the square button just there by the side.
Carousel doesn't work. It's that
Lower.
bad carousel you got.
Thank you. This is a map of the 12 banks of the U.S. Federal Reserve. Slide. Your scanners at every bank read these numbers at the bottom of the check. Slide. And then ship that check off to its corresponding branch. The East Coast branches are numbered 01 to 06. The central branch is 07, 08, so on and so forth.
You mean those numbers on the bottom of a check actually mean something?
All of this was in the report I filed 2 days ago. If you change a 02 to a 12, that means that check, which was cashed in New York, does not go to the New York Federal Branch, but it is rerouted all the way to the San Francisco Federal Branch. The bank doesn't even know the check is bounced for 2 weeks, which means our unsub can stay in one place, pay for the same city over and over again while this check circles the country.
You want to talk to my wife. She's the one who balances the checkbook at our house.
So there's a number of things here that I think are kind of interesting. So what jumps out at you from what we just watched in terms of, again, things that have a relationship to spiritual ideas that we might want to convey to people? Not all at once. Sue, go ahead.
Well, the workers, not the boss, but the workers are a little too easygoing about the wrongs that are going on.
Okay, so one thing that's interesting, and to be fair, actually, the guy who's in front there is not the boss. The one who actually asked the questions about asked whether, you talk to his wife, that was actually the boss. The rest of the agents who are there at the presentation, you're absolutely right, they're much too easygoing about this. They don't grasp the seriousness of what's being done here. And in particular, they are thinking in terms of one guy doing one thing. What's the problem with that kind of thinking?
Pattern.
Okay.
Becomes something that multiple people can do.
Okay. So once one person figures out the weakness in a system, other people can exploit that same weakness as long as they become aware of it. So the fact that he's identifying this problem and it's only one guy doesn't mean that's the end of the problem. It means it's the beginning of the problem. And so the rest of his fellow agents are not perceiving the seriousness of the situation both individually and in the bigger picture. Jerry, did you have something you were going to add?
I was just wondering how he came to the conclusion there was only one guy.
Well, that's a good question too. And in theory, that probably could have been, he probably could have been wrong about that. My guess is that there were some things that were consistent about what he was doing and where the checks were originally starting from. But that's not a sure thing. You're right. He may have very well been wrong in thinking there was one person. In particular, today, these kinds of operations, and it's more sophisticated than this, but these kinds of operations usually involve one person leading an enterprise of multiple people doing it for them. So if you are, for example, depositing bad checks, although that doesn't work very well anymore, you might have a number of people doing that in a number of places, and you're distributing the checks to them throughout the country. So that is and here again, that actually could be viewed as kind of a short-sightedness on his part, that there might not be anything more sophisticated than a single person doing all of this. Although in the context of the movie, it turns out he's right. What else? What else jumps out at you? Steve?
This, to me, kind of shows the emergence of someone using modern technology against itself to misconvey something or to cheat. And so if you want to take that into the spiritual realm, I think that throughout history there have been different advances in technology or information sharing, the development of different language Bibles and etc. And you can go way back even before that, but it's possible to exploit a weakness that people are not accustomed or knowledgeable about. I don't know anything about the routing number. I just checked my check though. I think we're in the San Francisco one.
Okay.
It's 12.
It is interesting because we look at our checks, and I assume most of you know this. You can look at your check and you get your account number off of your check. You can get the I forget there's the check number itself, and then the last set of numbers is the actual routing numbers. And yeah, so normally we're going to be, if you got your checks here or they were sent to your address here, then they're probably going to be the San Francisco office, I would think. So.
In the movie, they didn't know that the damage had been done until much later.
Okay. So these two things really kind of go together because the newer technology allowed him to do something that was even more devastating because it took longer for anybody to realize what was wrong and what was happening. And I think when you think about this expansion of technology, there's a lot of benefits that come with Bibles in all different languages so anybody can read it. There's a lot of benefits that come with the ability to convey by radio and then by television and now by the internet to convey information and ideas. But there's also a lot of damage and danger that can be done as well because you can print Bibles or other documents that just as easily as Bibles that are conflicting with that or that might lead people astray. You can broadcast by radio and television false information to way more people than you ever could have if you were speaking to them in person or something like that. And the internet takes it to another level because it's not just the ability to broadcast or provide information to almost anybody anywhere, it's also the ability to make it really hard to tell where it's coming from, to make it really hard to, or really easy to create multiple copies of something to make it look like a whole lot of different people think the same thing. And so you can be very deceptive. And again, as Steve identified, it's particularly problematic if you don't understand how the system works. And a lot of us don't understand how the systems work and what can be done and some of those kinds of things that go on behind the scenes, and just how easy it is to manipulate those systems against us sometimes. And so we think about the benefits, we're vaguely aware of the risks, but because we don't really understand the risks and understand how it can be manipulated, it can be very problematic. And because of the scale of it, it can do a lot of damage before anybody realizes it. We're seeing so many of these kids that are school shooters and people that are doing violent things that are becoming indoctrinated on the internet, and nobody ever sees it happening because they don't have to go anywhere, they don't have to hang out with anybody. There's none of those outward signs that we would normally see, except they stay in the room a lot. You know, and if they were kind of loners already, most people don't recognize that that's a problem. So the damage can be done before anybody realizes it's happening in a much more pervasive kind of a way. Now, what does that have to do with the spiritual side of things then?
Well, to reiterate, the technology today, it's amazing what you can find on the internet that you know is not real, but it appears to be very real. Little babies talking and,
right.
and dogs talking and stuff, and it looks very real. And you go, well, that can't be real, and it's absolutely realistic. And so you could get Charlton Heston, and you could create documentaries, you could use, and you could put out a lot of fake stuff and that looks absolutely real.
Yeah.
And we have to watch what we're watching. We've got to really.
Yeah. And if you're smart, if you want to fool people and you're smart, you don't have a dog talking because everybody's going to go, right, dogs don't talk. But what I was watching one of these videos, it's the ones that are kind of little short ones.
Yeah.
And it was one with dogs doing all these crazy things to save people, and it all looked like things dogs might do. But as one of them came up, there's a little watermark in the corner that was it was a watermark from one of the digital creation studio things. And what I immediately realized is I've been watching this thing, and none of the things were happening were probably real. Maybe one or two of them were, but almost all of it had just been manufactured, basically. But because of the fact that it was done very well, and it looked like, you know, home video footage, so that's not really high quality anyway, it didn't occur to me that I was watching stuff that was faked until something noticeable actually went wrong. And that's where you're really in danger, is because people are not doing it, and they're not making people say or do things that they could never do or that they would never do. They're making it just a little bit different or enough different to make you think it's real, and also to make you think it's disturbing.
So do that with the Bible, with
right.
Scripture, get legitimate looking stuff and say, now, what this says in the original language is actually this. And we don't know.
Yeah.
So you know, well, that's really interesting.
That's right.
And you buy into it. You got to really watch that.
Yeah. Sarah, go ahead. I'll come to you.
Yeah, I was leaning towards that, but I mean, one of the first lie is an edit of what God said, right?
Yeah.
So if we start taking out certain words that changes the entire meaning or flips it a 180, we're dealing with Ephesians 6. With putting on the armor of God, and we're fighting against principalities. You know, we used to think, or I remember being taught, like, the false doctrine of the early church, like you had to have the letter, right? And then it was spread basically through the game of telephone. And so the closer you were to the people who had actually read the letter or seen the letter, the more accurate it was. And now we're almost doing it again, where we're not in the scriptures and we don't know it as well, and then we can get led astray easier by a simple edit or somebody's interpretation or.
Right. And we're particularly vulnerable when it lines up with what we expect or want to hear. I can remember back in the 90s, I think, there were several different things that came out, and supposedly they made archaeological discoveries that helped to prove this or that about the Bible, and it turned out that it was made up by people. And there have been other stories like that about, you know, events that have happened that were supposedly sort of faith-affirming or whatever that really didn't happen. Well, we like those things, and we want to find those things, and so when somebody tells us those things are true, then we want to believe them. And there's two problems with that. One is that in many cases they can lead us into some false thinking, The other one is, what happens when you try to use that as a justification for your faith to somebody who actually knows it isn't real? You know, then it starts to look like you're the idiot, you know? And so these kinds of things can be weaknesses, and we're especially susceptible when they play on what we want things to be, what we want to be true anyway. Judge, you had your hand up.
I was, to support what Sarah just mentioned, if you are off 1 degree aiming at the moon, you're going to miss it. You're going to miss the moon by 1 degree. And that's the error, or that's the risk that we take by not studying the scripture ourselves.
And I know it is not common, but it is certainly true that there have been several groups that have altered the Bible for their own purposes. The most notable ones are the Jehovah's Witnesses, who basically created their own version of the Bible. And if you ever try to have a discussion with a Jehovah's Witness and they start telling you things that doesn't sound like they're in the Bible, it's because they're not. And if you get out your Bible and then they got their Bible, you're going to find that there are some places that are pretty important, particularly dealing with the fact that Christ was the Son of God and was God himself, that they have edited out of their Bible and they've altered in order to change the meanings of it so that that's not what it says, because they don't believe that's true. So in their case, they basically said, okay, here's what we believe, and here's the document that we're going to rely on, and the document we're going to rely on doesn't really help with what we believe, so let's make some changes to it and it'll be fine. You know, now that is modern day Jehovah's Witnesses, very few of them I think are fully cognizant of that fact, but the ones who did it at the beginning knew full well that they were changing the thing that they claimed to believe in order to make it what they wanted it to be. And most of the time, the origin point for these kinds of things is someone who is intentionally deceiving. They're not accidentally doing it. Now, just like in the movie here, Frank creates these fake checks, and then they get circulated around from the banks. And so what happens is the banks and the tellers and whatever, they become the messengers of this false information, not knowing that it's false information. But once it gets past that intentional dissemination, then all the rest of that a lot of times might be innocent if we're not in some way following up and making sure that we actually know what's really there. Now, today, this is not a viable tactic, what he was doing there with the checks. Why is that no longer a viable tactic today?
Digital world.
The digital world, yeah. Every check, when you give it to somebody behind the counter, when you give it to somebody at a grocery store, whatever it is, it gets scanned within minutes, sometimes the very second you give it to them, within hours at the very most, and they know whether it's legitimate or not. Now, there are still a couple of ways that you can do this, but you have to use foreign banks, and a lot of places won't take checks from foreign banks anymore for exactly that reason. So this scam doesn't work anymore because we developed a solution to that, which ironically is that digital thing that creates problems in other ways. So, and this is the reality, is that the original reason for the MICR stuff at the bottom of the check was both to make it more secure, because, you know, somebody forges a check and it's just a blank piece of paper with some stuff on it, there's no coding or anything. It's easy to say, okay, there's probably something wrong with this, you know. So we add some coding to it. It tells us the number, the account number, it tells us the check number, it tells us the routing, and we think, okay, well that's more secure because now we have that information right there on it. We can read it right there at the time and make sure, you know, does it line up? Does it look real? Is it encoded properly? Whatever. And so it creates a level of security. It also makes it easier to route it and stuff like that. You don't have to go through it, stamp it, and go. You just put it into the machine and it tells you where it's supposed to go. So it makes it easier, and it also theoretically makes it more secure. But one of the things that we find over and over and over again in both the real world, physical, material world, and in the spiritual world, which is even more real, is that when you add layers to make things easier, or when you add security, what that can do more than anything is make you feel like you are invulnerable. And the reality is that there are always ways to get around human institutional security. Always are. Now, God's security is a different thing, but human security, doing it with humans involved, there's always ways to get around it. And it starts with what we see at the beginning of this. How does this whole scene begin? What is Frank doing?
He's looking for that right person.
That's right. He's finding the person he can exploit. The weaknesses in our security almost always begin by finding a person that you can exploit. The term that con artists use is social engineering. It sounds nicer than, you know, lying and deceiving people, but that's what it is. So the hacker goes looking for somebody that, you know, whether it's sending out a whole bunch of spam emails and hoping one person will open it, or whether it's calling around and trying to find that right person, the guy who wants to get into a high-level system doesn't call just to get your bank account information. They call to find a way to worm into the system that you have access to, and once they get into it, then they can do whatever they want to. So those kind of guys are looking for something more than just one score. They're looking for something a lot bigger than that. And they're doing it primarily by exploiting human vulnerabilities, not systemic vulnerabilities, generally. So we have to be mindful that we are only as strong as our weaker links are. And so it's important not just to study for yourself, but it's also important to talk to other people, discuss what you know, lift them up as well, so that we are all strengthening ourselves, and not just some of us are getting strong and the rest are kind of being left behind. You know, we hope they can figure it out later on their own. You know, so we have an obligation to strengthen our brothers. Paul talks about that in Romans. He talks about it in Corinthians as well. We have an obligation to build each other up, not just to run on ahead, you know, and win the race or something like that. So, okay, any more comments or thoughts, Steve?
Well, we can see in Scripture where even early on in the church, there was people that wanted to exploit the spiritual gifts. They wanted to, you know, be the boss. They wanted to change the gospel. It's a time-honored tradition to be exploiting.
Yeah.
People are that way.
Yeah, you had not Ananias, who was the source of the Simon. You had Simon, who saw the gifts, but it wasn't the spiritual gifts that he got really excited about. What did he get really excited about? What did he really want?
Greed.
I get that, but I mean, thank you, Jerry, that's why he got excited. What I'm asking is, what did he ask the apostles to give him? It wasn't the gift itself. What did he want the apostles to give him? To sell it, actually.
The ability to pass it on.
The ability to pass the gifts on. And in that regard, Simon is a smart guy. Don't ever sell him for being an idiot, because he recognized the real money isn't in being able to put on magic shows. The real money is in being able to give people the power to put on their own magic shows. Because if you can do that, then, I mean, how much would somebody pay to be able to be regularly changing water to wine? I guess if they're an alcoholic especially, maybe a lot, you know. But, you know, so some of these things, so Simon is an example. You could even look at some of the people like Ananias and Sapphira as an example. They wanted to use the generosity of the church to basically build social status, is essentially what they were doing. And so you can go through and see it, and then you get into the, all these different, the Judaizing teachers, and then you have the Gnostics, and you have, just in the first century, you have all kinds of different things going on, taking advantage of the vulnerabilities of people and of the excitement that people had about the message. And so it's no surprise that that's continued all the way through the next 2,000 years, that we're seeing the same patterns kind of recurring, people trying to take advantage of the weaknesses of others. So. Okay, any more thoughts on that? All right, we're going to watch one more clip here. I don't know if we'll have time to get, what is this clip? Let me see here. Yeah, okay, this is actually kind of interesting. One
He has 3 checks, they all clear. I was going to deposit this one today. I don't want any trouble.
No trouble. No trouble at all. We'll just take this check and be on our way.
Good. Because I don't want my customers harassed.
What are you saying? You still here?
201.
Thank you.
Corner there.
Oh, thanks. Steps.
Hey, Mr. Murphy, how are you?
Is that Frank?
Yeah, that's Frank.
Hey, Frank, how are you?
How's the knee?
Come on, I'll reach you right now.
Take care.
Okay, Frank.
FBI. FBI! Come out of the bathroom! Step out of the bathroom! Hands on your head.
Oh, it's the new IBM Selectric.
Put your hands on your head.
Print time in 5 seconds.
Shut up!
Pop out the ball.
Put your hands on your head! Put your hands!
You know, he's got over 200 checks here.
Hands
Indian
on your head!
Drafting. He even has little payroll envelopes
Put it down.
addressed to himself.
Put it down! Drop it!
Relax. You're late, all right? My name's Alan, Barry Allen, United States Secret Service. Your boy just tried to jump out the window. My partner has him in custody.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You think the FBI are the only ones on this guy? I mean, come on. Come on, he's dabbling in government checks here. Been following a paper trail on this guy for months now. You mind taking that gun out of my face? Please, really. It makes me nervous. Yeah, sure. Take my whole wallet. You want my gun too? Come over here, take my gun. Hey, look, just do me a favor. Take a look outside. Look out the window. My partner's walking into the car as we speak. Look. That almost pissed in his pants when I came through the door. He jumped right through the window onto the hood of my car. Hey, Murph. Yeah, call the LAPD again. I don't want people walking through my crime scene.
I didn't expect the Secret Service on this.
Don't worry about it. Well, what's your name?
Henry. Carl Henry.
If I see some identification. Never can be too careful these days. Well, tough luck, Carl. 5 minutes earlier, you would have landed yourself a pretty good collar.
It's all right. 10 seconds later, you'd have been shot. Mind if I come downstairs with you? I've got to take a look at this guy.
Sure thing. Just do me a favor and sit tight for a second while I get this evidence downstairs. You know, I don't want some maid walking through here and making the bed. LAPD should be here any sec.
Wait. Your wallet.
You hang on to it for a minute. I trust you.
Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time to talk about this, but there's a couple of observations I want to make. One of which is only slightly related, well, it's not at all related to the rest of it. But so I don't know how many of you noticed, but when he gets up to the top floor, when Carl, the FBI agent, gets up to the top floor, and that maid freaks out because he's got a gun, he pulls out his wallet to show her his ID, but he shows her the back side of the wall. So all he showed her was basically a piece of leather, which is interesting because when you think about that, essentially, he expected her to assume that he was legitimate simply because he pulled out an ID without even really making sure she'd seen anything. And then very soon, he's going to make the exact same mistake and assume that somebody's legitimate because he's got credentials. And that's not something you notice the first time going through this, but it is something you notice when you're carefully pulling out scenes from a movie and actually building them and actually creating them so you can show them up here. So that was when I first picked that up, is that you don't actually see him show her his ID. The other thing, and I had to skip over this because there was some bad language in this part and it didn't really benefit very much anyway, is the question of why he went up there by himself, why Carl went up there by himself, not his two backup guys. And the reason was because as they left the office, and this is where the bad language came in, they are arguing about this, and Carl wants to have credit for the caller. He doesn't want to take these two guys with him. He leaves them behind to kind of, you know, watch the lower floors and whatever. They're both one of them's brand new, the other one got assigned to him because he messed up his last job and basically got demoted, so he had to work with Carl. So he doesn't like either of them, he's kind of mad about having them as his partners, and so he chooses to leave them behind, and he says, look, it's just a paper hanger, you know, he's not gonna be armed, it's not gonna be dangerous, I can take care of it. And so he leaves behind his backup and goes and does this by himself. Now, why is that a mistake? Even taking the danger element out of it, why does that turn out to be a mistake?
It'd be harder to deceive two people in the same way.
Or three,
Yes, yes.
Okay, so, and if you think about it, part of how did he keep Carl from how did Frank keep Carl from looking in his wallet? What did he do?
Distraction.
He distracted him. Now, if there's three people up there, can you do that as easily? No, because you say, go over here and look at this, one of the guys goes over and looks at it, the other guy keeps opening up the wallet, and the game's over. So by going by himself, he made himself more vulnerable to the situation, because especially, did he know what was going to happen when he went into that room? Obviously not. And so when you don't know what's going to happen, it's very difficult to prepare for it, and that almost always means you're better off with more people than just doing it by yourself. Now, Jerry, you raised your hand.
I was just thinking, you always have, you know, somebody else help than you think.
Right.
It's just, you know, your ideas are better. They see things you don't see.
Yeah.
They think about things that you're not thinking about. Things like that.
And there are times when groups of people working together can get dumber than the individuals within the group. And those of you who've been in bureaucratic situations, you're all nodding your head just like I am. And it's true. And it can take longer to make decisions and a lot of those things. So when you're trying to be proactive, when you're trying to make a decision or trying to go do something, sometimes somebody has to step up and say, okay, let's do this, and lead. But when you're talking about a dangerous situation or a situation where you can be taken advantage of, those strengths or those weaknesses become strengths because they slow you down and they make you think more about what you're doing because different people are suggesting different alternatives, and you're less likely to be vulnerable to someone taking advantage of you. So in this situation, his decision to leave his backup behind is at least part of what created the problem that he had. Now, it's no guarantee that it would have worked. Maybe all three of them would have been fooled, who knows? But it's a lot more likely that they would have been able to pool their ideas together and recognize that this was not what it appeared to be. So we're going to stop there because we don't have time to go on. So we'll pick up, there's a bunch of stuff in there that I do want to go back and look at. So next Sunday we'll go ahead and take a look at that and talk about some of the different ideas in there. But I just wanted to highlight that one because since I had to pull that part of the clip out, you wouldn't have known that it was there unless you remembered the movie in pretty specific detail. I didn't even remember it that clearly. So, all right, thank you guys.